Hi everybody, welcome to the Hairloss Show. I'm Russell Knudsen and
I'm Vikram Jayaprakash. Good to see you again, Russell.
Lovely to see you. So today,
let's talk about
hairlines.
Yeah, so we love hairlines. We do a lot of hair transplant surgery, so talking about hairlines is a real passion for us, isn't it?
So that this is the thing that even doctors coming to the field do not understand the equal importance that design has to the execution of the practical aspects of it. So what we see so many young doctors come to conference, and what I want to learn is how to harvest.
Yes.
And that to them is how they take the hair out of the back is how hard can it be? I've even heard a senior surgeon say, oh, hairline's easy, you just put 3 dots and you join it up. And it completely underestimates the subtleties that are important about making sure that through the lifelong period that the patient has that hairline, it's got to be undetectable, or basically undetectable.
And so this is really important. You raise a very valid point, which is that new doctors coming into the field are more concerned about how they're going to extract a graft from the back of their head. And the same can be said also for patients who are considering having a hair transplant, because they're going, well, how many thousand grafts do I need to...
and what size punch are you going to use?
Yes, right. So, but again, the critical aspect is about the design. It is about how that looks for that individual person.
Let me explain how I deal with it. People come into me and say, I've never seen a good one, a good hairline.
Yes.
I'm saying, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And they look at me and go, what? It's like, you don't notice the good ones.
Yes.
And that's the point, right?
Yes.
That the good ones don't. When I came into the field 41 years ago, we were doing big plugs back then, which of course was difficult to make them look good anyway. Mm-hmm. But in the first few years I was in the field and I saw patients come to me from other clinics, I could pick which clinic they'd come from without having to ask, because it was like a signature hairline for that clinic. So it was a one-size-fits-all approach. Every person that came in got exactly the same design, whether it was the 3-point technique or whether they put a ruler on and bent the ruler and just drew around it, or did it with a compass or whatever. And even today, you go to a conference and the medical supply companies will now give you flexible stainless steel or aluminium templates that you just put on the scalp and draw your line, or you use a laser to do it. Now, the only problem with that is that everybody comes out looking the same.
So it's a question of natural-looking hairlines versus the signature-looking hairlines.
Well, it's the factory approach, right? This signature hairline is a factory approach, because it's not even your signature anymore. It's whatever the medical supply company gave you as the template that you decided to use to make it. Because it's a bit scary. When I train young doctors now, I think the thing that bothers them a lot is how to do the hairline.
Yes.
But they are being trained properly, so they know this is a big deal. I was just seeing from someone coming in working for a chain who's told, just draw it off this and away you go. And here's your 6-week training program. So we just should never underestimate the subtleties involved in that, because there's differences in skull shapes.
Yes.
Right. Not all patients want the same hairline height above the eyebrow. Age is an important factor. So is the degree of balding when you start, because if you've got a young man with a small amount of thinning or loss, he wants his 18-year-old hairline back, and this is what you've got to discuss with him about really the wisdom of that. If I've got a 50-year-old or a guy who's come in and he's lost a lot of hair and he hasn't had a young man's hairline for 20 years, he usually doesn't want a 20-year-old man's hairline. He just wants it down to a reasonable level so it frames the face and gives him the outcome. So, what you see when you talk to the patient in front of you is a very important part of the consultation about what is reasonable, because it's got to look good at any age. We make the promise that it's going to stick around.
Yes.
Right? We make that promise. And the other thing that we see when we worry about whether people are doing the natural hairlines is that if you don't put enough variability into it, it looks like a hairline. Now, that's a really poor name for what we do. It's a hair zone.
But we're seeing that
more and more. We're seeing lines now, because it's just like draw it and away they go. So it's, if you look at, and anybody contemplating a hair transplant should look amongst their family and amongst their friends and have a look at hairlines and see what the natural variability is between 10 or 20 of their, their friends or their relatives, and see what difference there is, because there is a big difference, big variability, I suppose, the way I'm wording, in normal hairline distributions. And you've got to put enough single hairs in a scatter zone. It can't go from nothing to 100% density straight away, because then it looks like a line. There's a lot of subtlety in making it.
I mean, it's very interesting, because I talk to my patients a lot about this, and I go through this in a very stepwise process, and I know you do the same, which is that we say, listen, we want a hairline that you're happy with. I mean, that is the fundamental thing that we want to achieve. But we want to make sure that it also exists in nature. Correct. So you won't see you or I, for example, doing sort of right angles and really flat hairlines. No. We also want to make sure that this hairline suits you now, and then in 10, 20, 50 years' time, because it's got to stand the test of time. And then the last thing, we want to make sure that it looks natural. We don't want anyone to come up to you and go, I love your hair transplant, right? It should be, like you said, no one should pick it, because no one should know that you've had it done.
So, it's interesting. A lot of patients come back and tell me that, at the 6 and 12 month mark, that people think they look different, but they don't quite know why. And that's because you haven't given them something unnatural that draws the eye to it. And that's the pick, is that it doesn't draw the eye to it. It just frames the face and go, gee, you're looking good, not quite sure what it is.
Made me think of not a story, but just made me think about you and I, because you obviously taught me my skill set, and that happened through a journey of many years. And if I reflect back, and I just suddenly was thinking about it as you were talking, I was like, you and I had lots of discussions about hair transplants and how to do that and the different techniques. And you taught me and trained me in the various aspects of how to harvest and plant grafts. And then there came a point where you're going, okay, yep, you can do that. You can do that on your own. But you never let me, for the longest time, design the hairline, right? You still maintain, because that fundamentally, and you never said it in that way, but I knew where you were going with it, which is that is the most critical part of the process. And I remember you drawing the line and wiping it out, and then looking at it from the front and getting the mirror and standing behind the patient and making sure that you could see it from all different angles, and doing that. And really, that was, when I got to the point where I could do that, that was the culmination. Not that you never end up, you stop learning, but that was the sort of pinnacle of going, right, okay, well, I can now do that.
And what that really means on a practical term is that you didn't damage a lot of young men learning how to do the hairline.
Yes.
So I remember back to the days when I was trained in 1982 through to 1984. Yeah, that long ago. And I watched 120 before I did one.
Yeah.
And so I have much the same, kind of concept now, that I want people to see 50 or 70 or 100 hairlines that I've drawn if I'm training them. I want them to look at it and show them that they're not all the same, right? They can see that why I'm changing it. I'm listening to what the patient wants, working out whether it's practical, looking at the shape and looking at the distribution of hair. How much hair have you got? If you want hair more, if you've got a lot of balding and you want more hair back there, you've got to have a higher hairline at the front. Otherwise, we'll run out of grafts.
Yes.
There's a lot of things that go into it. But I want them to see a lot of times before I'm going to set them loose.
Yeah. So I think, it's... to summarize the whole thing and to sum it up, hairline design is an absolutely critical aspect of the procedure. And if you are someone who's, contemplating having a hair transplant, it's not a quick and rough and ready line that someone draws.
This is where the artistry comes in, right? You have the artistry of the hair transplant, which is the design, and then you have the execution of the transplant, which is the scientific part, because you've got to transplant the hairs there in the right direction, but make sure they grow by not damaging them in the process.
Yes.
That's where the science and the execution comes in. But if you don't get the design right, it doesn't matter how good the execution is, it's not going to be a good cosmetic result.
So should the patient be questioning the hairline? The person who's drawing the hairline. I mean, going, right, I'm thinking about having a hair transplant. What would you suggest? And they should be asking, do you think this hairline will last me, will look appropriate in 20, 30 years time?
Absolutely. It's a critical aspect of it. There's a big variety in the way patients approach it with me, but I tend to ask an open question. I'm going, well, what are you thinking about that you would like to have? And then they'll go, I want it around here. And I'm going, well, that might have been okay as a teenager, but that's going to look more feminine now than masculine. Going, what do you mean? Going, you just drawn something that's, you're showing me something that's feminine. And so then we do this education process where, we sort of, horse trade a bit back and forth about what they really want and how we should get there. So I think that's very, very important that we understand that if the patient's coming with a fixed idea and we agree with it, then there's not a problem.
Yes.
But if we don't agree with it, we have to explain why we don't agree with it and see how they feel about it. Okay. And then there are the patients that come in at the other end of the spectrum and say, look, you're the expert, you just put it wherever you want. And I'll go, well, I'll show you a couple of variations, right? I won't just say, okay, here it is.
Yeah.
Right? If they say to me, you're the expert, you put it where you think it should go, I'll give them a couple of different variations, just two maybe, and ask them what they prefer. And they go, oh yeah, they might pick the higher one, they might pick the lower one. But they're involved in the process. So I always want the patient to be involved in the process and take ownership of what's going on.
And I think that's really important because sometimes, and quite understandably, people come and see you in a very heightened emotional state, right? Because no one ever liked the concept of losing hair. So they're coming to you that in a very sort of emotional, humble state. And so they will say, you tell me, what's the best hairline? And I think it's really important to understand that there is no such thing as a best hairline. There's no such thing as a correct hairline. You have to be part of the process. We've got to understand what you want, what will give you that level of satisfaction while you're going through this journey.
And we're talking about male hairlines.
Correct. Yes.
Because female hairlines is a completely different discussion.
Yeah, that's true, and we should have probably highlighted that from the beginning. But I think that's the fundamental thing is that there is no right hairline, and there's no universal hairline that most people have. It does my head in when you see the semicircular hairline that a lot of people are coming away with.
So I just go back to the point I made earlier as my finishing point here.
Yeah.
If you are thinking as a young man or a middle-aged man about getting a hairline done as part of a transplant, look around your group. Look at the younger ones, look at the older ones, look at your relatives, look at your family, and get a feel for what they really look like. And then you'll notice that nobody has the same hairline. Not a single person that you meet will have exactly the same hairline as the next person. And understand the natural variability in that.
Cool. All right. Well, I hope you found that useful. We can go on and on for days about hairlines, but I think that's something that's a topic that we obviously feel very, very passionate about. And so I hope you, again, do your research, make sure you get good advice, make sure you've been counseled appropriately. And it just leaves me to say thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you on the next episode.